Odysseus, the legendary hero of ancient Greece, returned home after 20 years of war and wandering. He reclaimed his throne. He reunited with his faithful wife. He slaughtered 108 men in his own hall, hanged 12 young women, and mutilated a servant so brutally that the man bled out in the courtyard, and we call him a hero. Imagine standing in that hall the morning after. The floor is slick with blood. Bodies are piled against the walls. The smell of death hangs in the air. 12 girls, some of them teenagers, all of them enslaved, swing from a rope strung between two pillars. Homer, the poet who immortalized Odysseus, describes their deaths with chilling efficiency. Their feet twitched for a little, but not for very long. This is not the story you were told in school. This is not the tale of the clever hero who built the Trojan horse and outsmarted monsters. That story exists and it is true, but it is not the whole truth. Because Odysseus, the man we celebrate, also orchestrated the genocide of an entire city. He killed a baby to prevent future revenge. His arrogance got 600 of his own men killed. He spent 8 years sleeping with goddesses while his wife waited faithfully at home. And when he finally returned to Ithaca, he turned his palace into a slaughterhouse. So here is the question. Was Odysseus a brilliant, resilient hero who survived impossible odds? Or was he a war criminal whose so-called victories were built on rivers of blood? The answer is not simple. Odysseus is one of the most morally complex characters in all of mythology. The Greeks loved him, but if you strip away the poetry and look at his actions through the lens of morality, the picture that emerges is deeply disturbing. Today, we are going to examine his most famous exploits, not as myth, but as choices. The Trojan horse, the Cyclops, the massacre of the suitors, the 600 men who never came home. By the end, you will have all the evidence, and you will decide, hero or monster. Let's begin with the event that made him famous, the Trojan horse. The Trojan War has been raging for 10 years, a decade of blood, starvation, disease, and death. It started because a Trojan prince named Paris stole Helen, the wife of a Greek king, and brought her to Troy. The Greeks, led by King Agamemnon, assembled the greatest army the ancient world had ever seen and sailed across the Aegean to get her back. But Troy is not an easy city to conquer. Its walls are massive, built by gods according to legend, and impenetrable to siege engines. The Greeks have tried everything. They have starved the city. They have burned the fields. They have fought pitched battles on the plains outside the walls. Thousands have died on both sides. The greatest warriors of the age, Achilles, Hector, Ajax, have all bled into the Trojan dust, and yet the city stands. By the 10th year, both sides are exhausted. The Greek kings are tired of war. Their men are dying of disease in the camps. Supplies are running low. Morale is collapsing. Some commanders are talking about sailing home and abandoning the whole cursed enterprise. But Odysseus has an idea. Imagine being in the Greek War Council when Odysseus proposes his plan. The tent is full of hardened generals, men who have spent a decade killing and being killed. They are skeptical of clever tricks. They want a decisive battle, a final charge, something that feels like honorable warfare. But Odysseus is not interested in honor. He is interested in results. He stands before the assembled kings and lays out the plan. The Greeks will build a massive wooden horse, large enough to hide soldiers inside. They will pretend to sail away, leaving the horse on the beach as a gift to the Trojans, an offering to the goddess Athena, meant to ensure their safe voyage home. The Trojans, seeing the Greek fleet disappear over the horizon, will believe the war is over. They will bring the horse inside the city as a trophy, and that night, when Troy is asleep and celebrating their victory, the Greek soldiers hidden inside will emerge, open the gates, and let the army, hidden just offshore, pour into the city. It is brilliant, it is audacious, and it is deeply, profoundly dishonest. Some of the Greek commanders object. Ajax, a warrior known for his brute strength and straightforward approach to combat, is furious. This is not how wars are supposed to be won, he argues. This is trickery. This is cowardice. Warriors should face each other in open battle, not hide in wooden props like stage actors. But Agamemnon, the supreme commander, sees the genius of the plan. He is tired. He wants to go home. He overrides the objections and gives Odysseus permission to proceed. The horse is built over the course of weeks. Imagine the scale of this construction project. The horse has to be large enough to hold dozens of armed men, yet convincing enough to look like a religious offering. Greek carpenters, under Odysseus's supervision, construct a hollow wooden frame in the shape of a rearing horse, towering 30 feet high. It is covered in polished planks, decorated with carvings, and fitted with a hidden trapdoor in the belly. The best warriors of Greece volunteer to hide inside. Odysseus himself will lead them. Alongside him are Menelaus, the husband of Helen, Diomedes, one of the fiercest fighters in the Greek army, Neoptolemus, the young son of the legendary Achilles. In total, somewhere between 30 and 50 men crawl into the belly of the horse, armed with swords and shields, and wait in the suffocating darkness. The rest of the Greek army breaks camp. They burn their tents, load their ships, and sail away. But they do not go far. They sail to the nearby island of Tenedos, just out of sight of Troy, and wait. From the walls of Troy, the Trojans watch in stunned disbelief. After 10 years, the Greeks are leaving. The beach, which has been crowded with tents and siege equipment for a decade, is empty. All that remains is the enormous wooden horse standing alone on the sand. Imagine being a Trojan citizen that morning. You have lived under siege for 10 years. Your children have grown up knowing nothing but war. You have buried friends, family, neighbors. You have eaten through your food stores. You have prayed every day for this nightmare to end. And now, finally, the enemy is gone. The gates of Troy open for the first time in years. People flood onto the plain, weeping, laughing, celebrating. They approach the horse cautiously at first, unsure if it is a trap, but it is just wood. It does not move. It does not attack. A Greek deserter is found hiding near the beach. His name is Sinon, and he has been left behind deliberately as part of Odysseus's plan. He tells the Trojans a story. He claims that the Greeks built the horse as an offering to Athena to atone for stealing one of her sacred statues earlier in the war. He says they made it deliberately large so the Trojans could not bring it into the city, because if they did, Troy would be blessed by the goddess and become invincible. It is a lie. Every word of it is a lie. But Sinon sells it perfectly. He even lets the Trojans torture him to prove he is telling the truth. The Trojans debate. Some, like the priest Laocoon, are suspicious. Laocoon famously warns, "I fear the Greeks, even when they bring gifts." He throws a spear at the horse's side and hears a hollow echo. He begs the Trojans not to bring it inside. But then, in a twist of fate or divine intervention, two enormous serpents emerge from the sea and strangle Laocoon and his two sons to death in front of the entire city. The Trojans take this as a sign from the gods. Laocoon was wrong. The horse is sacred. They tear down part of their own wall to fit the horse through the gates. Imagine the effort. Imagine the irony. For 10 years, those walls kept the Greeks out. Now the Trojans are dismantling them to bring a Greek trick inside. The horse is dragged into the city center. That night, Troy celebrates. Wine flows, music plays. Families feast in the streets. After a decade of war, they finally allow themselves to believe it is over. They finally allow themselves to sleep deeply. And in the darkness, the trapdoor in the belly of the horse opens. Odysseus and his men descend silently into the sleeping city. They move through the streets like ghosts, killing the sentries, opening the gates. The signal fires are lit. The Greek fleet, waiting offshore, sees the flames and sails back to the beach. Thousands of Greek soldiers pour into Troy. What follows is not a battle. It is a massacre. The Trojans, drunk and unarmed, are cut down in their homes. Families are slaughtered in their beds. The old king, Priam, is murdered at the altar of a temple, begging for mercy. His wife, Hecuba, is taken as a slave. Their daughters are dragged away to Greek ships. The infant son of Hector, the greatest Trojan hero, is torn from his mother's arms and thrown from the city walls to ensure he will never grow up to avenge his father. The temples are looted and burned. The houses are torched. Women are raped in the streets. By dawn, Troy, one of the greatest cities in the world, is nothing but smoke and ash and corpses. And Odysseus, the architect of this plan, walks through the ruins of the city he destroyed and calls it victory. So here is the question. Was the Trojan horse a stroke of genius, or was it a war crime? From a tactical perspective, it is undeniably brilliant. Odysseus ended a 10-year war with minimal Greek casualties. He used deception and psychology instead of brute force. He understood that the Trojans' greatest weakness was not their walls, but their hope. He gave them a reason to believe the war was over, and that hope killed them. But from a moral perspective, the picture is far uglier. The Trojans were not defeated in open combat. They were tricked. They were celebrating peace when they were butchered. And the slaughter did not stop with soldiers. Women, children, the elderly, none were spared. Entire families were erased. Temples were desecrated. And the city itself, a center of culture and trade that had stood for generations, was burned to the ground. And then there is the murder of Astyanax, Hector's infant son. Ancient sources disagree on who gave the order, but Odysseus is frequently named as the one who argued for it. His logic was cold and rational. If the boy lives, he will grow up knowing that the Greeks killed his father and destroyed his city. He will seek revenge. Therefore, he must die. So they threw a baby off a wall. This is the man we call a hero. The Trojan horse made Odysseus famous. It secured his place in legend, but it also set the template for the rest of his story. Brilliance mixed with cruelty, survival purchased with the blood of others, and a willingness to do whatever it takes to win, no matter the cost. And the cost, as we will see, is always paid by someone else. The Trojan War is over. Troy is ash. The Greek kings load their ships with plunder and slaves and set sail for home. For most of them, the journey takes a few weeks, maybe a few months if the winds are bad. But for Odysseus, the journey will take 10 years. 10 years of wandering, of monsters and gods, of watching his men die one by one until he is the only one left. The question we have to ask is why? Why does Odysseus suffer for a decade while other Greek commanders make it home safely? The easy answer, the one Homer gives us, is that the gods are punishing him. Poseidon, the god of the sea, is angry at Odysseus and makes his voyage a nightmare. But Poseidon does not become angry at Odysseus randomly. He becomes angry because of a choice Odysseus makes, a choice born of pride, recklessness, and a refusal to listen to the people who depend on him. That choice happens on an island inhabited by a creature called a Cyclops. Imagine you are one of Odysseus's sailors. You have survived 10 years of war. You watched friends die at Troy. You helped build the Trojan horse. You participated in the sacking of the city, and you carry the weight of what you did there. Now finally, you're going home. Your ship is loaded with Trojan gold. You have enough wealth to live comfortably for the rest of your life. All you have to do is survive the voyage. The fleet stops at a small island to rest and resupply. The island is lush and green, with fresh water and wild goats. It seems like a paradise. Across a narrow strait, you can see another, larger island. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Someone lives there. Odysseus decides to investigate. He chooses 12 men, his best, most trusted sailors, and takes a single ship across the strait. The rest of the fleet stays behind, safe on the smaller island. You are one of the 12. You row across the water and beach the ship on the larger island. Odysseus leads you inland, and you come to a massive cave. The entrance is so large that you could drive a cart through it. Inside, you see pens filled with sheep and goats. There are baskets of cheese, buckets of milk, everything stored neatly. Clearly, someone lives here. Clearly, that someone is very, very large. Your instincts scream at you to leave. This is not your property. You are trespassing. But Odysseus has other plans. He wants to meet the owner of the cave. Why? Because of Xenia, the Greek custom of guest friendship. In Greek culture, a host is obligated to offer gifts to travelers. Odysseus, fresh from looting Troy, wants more treasure. He wants to see what gift this giant stranger will offer. His men beg him to leave. They say, "Let's just take some cheese and go. We don't need to meet whoever lives here." But Odysseus refuses. He is curious, he is proud, and he is in charge. So you wait. As the sun sets, you hear a sound like an earthquake. The ground shakes. The owner of the cave is returning, and when he appears in the entrance, blocking out the light, you realize you have made a terrible mistake. He is a Cyclops, a giant, easily twice the height of a man, with a single eye in the center of his forehead. His name is Polyphemus, and he is the son of Poseidon. He herds his sheep into the cave, and then he rolls an enormous boulder across the entrance, sealing you inside. He does not do this to trap you. He does it every night to keep his flock safe from predators. He does not even notice you yet. You are insects to him. Then he lights a fire, and in the flickering light, he sees 13 men cowering in the shadows of his home. Imagine the fear. You are trapped in a cave with a creature that could crush your skull with one hand. There is no escape. The boulder blocking the entrance is so massive that even all 13 of you together could not move it. Polyphemus speaks. His voice is deep, booming, curious. Who are you? Where do you come from? He does not sound hostile. He sounds like a shepherd who found strangers in his barn. Odysseus steps forward. He could lie. He could say they are lost fishermen, harmless travelers. He could beg for mercy, but instead, Odysseus appeals to Xenia. He says, "We are Greeks. returning from the war at Troy. We come as suppliants, seeking the hospitality that Zeus himself commands you to give. It is a bold move. He is invoking the gods, reminding the Cyclops of his sacred duty to treat guests with kindness. But Polyphemus does not care about Zeus. He does not care about Xenia. He is a creature who lives outside the rules of civilization. And he is hungry. He reaches out, grabs two of your comrades, and smashes their heads against the stone floor like you would crack eggs. The sound is unbearable. The cave fills with the smell of blood and brain matter. Polyphemus eats them raw, crunching through bone, slurping the marrow. He washes the meal down with milk, then lies down to sleep, his belly full. You are paralyzed with horror. 2 men are dead, 11 of you remain, and you are trapped. Odysseus does not sleep. He thinks. By morning, he has a plan. When Polyphemus wakes, he grabs 2 more men and eats them for breakfast. Then he rolls the boulder aside, just enough to let his sheep out to graze, and rolls it back into place, trapping the survivors inside. He leaves for the day. Odysseus acts quickly. He finds a massive wooden staff in the cave, Polyphemus's walking stick, as thick as a ship's mast. He and his men sharpen one end into a point and harden it in the fire. They hide it in the shadows. That evening, Polyphemus returns. He eats 2 more men. 6 are dead now. 7 of you remain, including Odysseus. But this time, Odysseus approaches the Cyclops with a gift. He offers him wine, strong, undiluted wine from Troy, the kind that could knock a grown man unconscious. Polyphemus drinks it greedily. He has never tasted anything like it. He drinks bowl after bowl, and soon he is drunk, swaying, slurring his words. He asks Odysseus his name, and here Odysseus does something clever. He says, "My name is Nobody." Polyphemus laughs. He says, "Nobody, I will eat you last. That is my gift to you." Then he collapses into a drunken stupor. Odysseus and his men pull the sharpened stake from the shadows. They heat the tip in the fire until it glows red. Then, together, all 7 of you lift the massive pole and drive it into the Cyclops' single eye. Imagine the scene, the wooden point, thick as a tree trunk, sizzling as it punches through the eye socket. Polyphemus screams, a sound so loud it shakes the walls of the cave. He thrashes, clawing at his face, ripping the stake out. Blood and fluid pour from the ruined socket. He is blind. He roars for help. Other Cyclopes living in nearby caves hear him and come to his door. They shout, "Polyphemus, what's wrong? Who is attacking you?" And Polyphemus, in his agony, screams back, "Nobody! Nobody is attacking me." The other Cyclopes, confused, assume he is going mad or having a nightmare. They leave. Odysseus has won. When morning comes, Polyphemus, blind and furious, rolls the boulder aside to let his sheep out to graze. He sits at the entrance, running his hands over the back of each animal to make sure the Greeks are not riding them. But Odysseus and his men cling to the undersides of the sheep, hidden in the thick wool. One by one, they pass beneath the Cyclops' hands and escape into the open air. They run to the ship. They row frantically toward open water. They have survived. They have outwitted a monster. It is a perfect escape. But Odysseus cannot leave it at that. As the ship pulls away from the shore, Odysseus stands at the stern and shouts back at the blinded Cyclops. He taunts him. He mocks him. "Cyclops, if anyone asks who blinded you, tell them it was Odysseus, son of Laertes, king of Ithaca." His men beg him to stop. They row harder, trying to get out of range, but Odysseus, drunk on his own cleverness, cannot resist. He has to make sure Polyphemus knows who defeated him. He has to claim the glory. Polyphemus, hearing the name, roars in fury. He tears a boulder from the mountainside and hurls it at the ship. It lands just short, creating a wave that nearly capsizes them. The men row desperately and finally they escape, but the damage is done. Polyphemus prays to his father, Poseidon. He begs the god to curse Odysseus, to make his journey home a nightmare, to kill his crew, to ensure that even if Odysseus survives, he arrives home broken, alone, and too late to save what he loves. Poseidon hears the prayer, and he grants it. So here is the question. Was Odysseus a hero in the cave of the Cyclops, or was he a reckless fool whose pride killed his men? Let's break it down. The entire situation was Odysseus's fault from the beginning. His men begged him not to enter the cave. They wanted to take some cheese and leave, but Odysseus insisted on staying because he wanted guest gifts. He wanted treasure. He put his crew in danger for greed. When Polyphemus trapped them, Odysseus showed brilliance. The plan to get the Cyclops drunk and blind him was genius. The nobody trick was clever. Escaping under the sheep was resourceful. If the story ended there, Odysseus would be a hero. But it does not end there, because Odysseus, safe on his ship, could not resist shouting his name. He had to make sure the monster knew who beat him. He had to claim the glory, and that act of arrogance, that refusal to stay silent and let the victory speak for itself, directly caused the curse that will kill most of his crew over the next several years. 6 men died in that cave, but because Odysseus shouted his name, hundreds more will die in the years to come. They will drown in storms sent by Poseidon. They will be eaten by monsters. They will starve on barren islands. And it all traces back to this moment, to a man who could not keep his mouth shut. Odysseus saved his men from the Cyclops, but he also doomed them. The question is, does the cleverness erase the recklessness? Does the escape justify the cost? Or is Odysseus just a man who values his own pride more than the lives of the people who follow him? Odysseus's journey home is filled with monsters, storms, and divine intervention. But perhaps the most morally complicated chapters of his story are not the battles with Cyclopes or sea serpents. They are the years he spends with 2 women, the witch goddess Circe and the immortal nymph Calypso. These episodes are often framed as tragic. Odysseus, the faithful husband, is held captive by beautiful goddesses who refuse to let him go. He longs for home, for his wife Penelope, for his son Telemachus. He is a victim of forces beyond his control, a man trapped by the whims of divine beings. But if you read the text closely, a different picture emerges, a picture of a man who may not have been quite so reluctant, a picture of choices made, years spent in comfort, and a betrayal disguised as fate. Let's start with Circe. After the disaster with the Cyclops, Odysseus's fleet is battered and reduced. They arrive at the island of Aiaia, home of the sorceress Circe. Odysseus sends a scouting party inland to explore. His men find a beautiful palace surrounded by wolves and lions that behave like tame dogs. Inside, they meet Circe, a goddess with golden hair and a voice like honey. She invites them in, she offers them food and wine, and when they drink, she strikes them with her wand and transforms them into pigs. One man, Eurylochus, does not enter the palace. He watches in horror from the trees as his comrades are turned into swine, then runs back to the ship to tell Odysseus what happened. Odysseus, to his credit, does not abandon his men. He takes his sword and marches to Circe's palace alone. ready to fight her. On the way, he is stopped by the god Hermes, who gives him a magical herb called moly that will protect him from Circe's magic. Hermes also gives him advice. When Circe tries to transform him, he must draw his sword and threaten her. She will be so impressed by his resistance that she will negotiate. It happens exactly as Hermes predicted. Circe offers Odysseus wine. He drinks it. She strikes him with her wand. Nothing happens. Odysseus draws his sword and rushes at her, ready to kill. Circe, shocked and terrified, falls to her knees and begs for mercy. And then she offers him her bed. Imagine this moment. Odysseus came here to rescue his men. He has Circe at his mercy. He could demand their release and leave immediately. But Hermes warned him, do not sleep with Circe unless she swears an oath not to harm you. So Odysseus makes her swear, and then he sleeps with her. Homer does not describe it as rape. He does not describe it as coercion. He describes it as a transaction. Circe swears an oath. Odysseus lowers his sword. They go to bed. The next morning, she releases his men, transforming them back into humans. She offers Odysseus and his crew hospitality, and Odysseus accepts. They stay on Aea for 1 year. 1 full year, not 1 day, not 1 week, 1 year. Imagine being one of Odysseus's sailors. You came to this island terrified, transformed into an animal, and then rescued by your captain. You assume you will leave immediately, continue the journey home. But days pass, weeks pass, months pass, and Odysseus shows no sign of wanting to leave. Why? Because Circe is beautiful, because her palace is comfortable, because the food is good, the wine is strong, and the beds are soft. After years of war and hardship, Odysseus has found a paradise, and he is in no hurry to leave it. It is only after a full year that his men finally work up the courage to confront him. They say, "Captain, we need to go home. We have been here long enough." And Odysseus, as if waking from a dream, agrees. Circe does not try to stop him. She gives him supplies, advice for the rest of his journey, and even instructions on how to reach the Underworld to consult the dead prophet Tiresias. She sends him on his way with a blessing. So here is the question. Was Odysseus trapped by Circe, or did he stay willingly? The text does not describe chains. It does not describe him weeping on the beach, begging to leave. He stayed for a year, sleeping with a goddess, feasting in her halls, while his men waited and his wife aged alone on Ithaca. And when he finally left, it was not because Circe released him. It was because his crew reminded him that he had a home to return to. But if Circe is morally ambiguous, the episode with Calypso is even worse. After leaving Circe, Odysseus's fleet is destroyed in a storm sent by Zeus. All of his remaining men are killed. Odysseus alone survives, clinging to a piece of wreckage, adrift in the open sea for 9 days. He washes ashore on the island of Ogygia, home of the nymph Calypso. Calypso is stunningly beautiful, immortal, and utterly alone. She finds Odysseus half dead on the beach, nurses him back to health, and falls in love with him. She offers him immortality. She offers him eternal youth. She offers to make him a god so that he can stay with her forever. Odysseus refuses. He says he wants to go home to his wife, but Calypso does not let him leave. She keeps him on her island for 7 years. 7 years. And during those 7 years, Homer tells us, Odysseus weeps. He sits on the beach every day, staring at the horizon, crying for Ithaca. He is homesick. He is heartbroken. He is a prisoner. But every night, he shares Calypso's bed. Homer is very clear about this. He writes, "At night he would lie beside her, of necessity, in the hollow caves, unwilling lover beside ardent lover." The phrase "of necessity" is doing a lot of work here. It implies coercion. It implies that Odysseus does not want this, but he has no choice. But let's be honest, does that make sense? Odysseus is a warrior, a king, a man who blinded a Cyclops, who tricked the Trojans, who survived a decade of war. Are we supposed to believe that he is powerless to resist a nymph, that he cannot say no? Or is it easier to share her bed and blame it on fate? Because here is the uncomfortable truth. Odysseus spends 7 years living in comfort with a beautiful, immortal woman who adores him. She offers him food, shelter, companionship, and eternal life. And yes, he cries during the day. Yes, he says he wants to go home. But at night, he does not sleep on the beach. He does not refuse her. He lies beside her of necessity. It is only when Zeus, pressured by the goddess Athena, orders Calypso to release Odysseus that he is allowed to leave. Calypso obeys reluctantly. She gives him tools to build a raft, supplies for the journey, and even a favorable wind. And Odysseus sails away. So let's add this up. Odysseus spends 1 year with Circe and 7 years with Calypso. That is 8 years. 8 years sleeping with other women while his wife, Penelope, waits faithfully on Ithaca, fighting off over 100 suitors who want to take Odysseus's throne and force her to remarry. Penelope does not know if her husband is alive or dead. She has not seen him in nearly 20 years. She is under enormous pressure to give up, to accept that he is gone, to move on. But she refuses. She remains loyal. She waits. And Odysseus, he is sleeping with goddesses. Now, to be fair, the ancient Greeks did not view this the way we do. In their culture, male infidelity was not necessarily seen as a betrayal, especially if it was with divine beings. The gods operate outside mortal rules. If a goddess wants you, you do not say no. And Odysseus's ultimate goal, to return home to Penelope, never wavers. He does eventually go back to her. But if we are judging Odysseus by his actions and not by ancient cultural norms, we have to ask, is crying on a beach enough to absolve you of 8 years of infidelity? Is it enough to say, "I was forced," when you could have resisted? Is it heroic to sleep with 2 women for 8 years and then return to your wife and expect her to welcome you as if nothing happened? And here is the darker question. If Odysseus had been female and had spent 8 years sleeping with male gods while her husband waited faithfully at home, would we call her a victim? Or would we call her unfaithful? The answer reveals a lot about how we view heroes, gender, and loyalty. Odysseus is not defined by these years with Circe and Calypso, but they are part of his story. They complicate the image of the faithful husband longing for home. They add shades of grey to a character we are supposed to see as morally clear, because the truth is, Odysseus is a man of contradictions. He is clever and reckless. He is loyal and unfaithful. He is a victim and a participant. And the genius of Homer's storytelling is that he does not tell us how to feel about it. He simply shows us what happened and lets us decide. So what do you think? Was Odysseus a prisoner of divine beings, forced into situations beyond his control? Or was he a man who took what was offered, enjoyed it, and then blamed the gods when it was convenient? The answer may depend on how generous you want to be. After 20 years, 10 at Troy, 10 wandering, Odysseus finally returns to Ithaca. He arrives alone, disguised as a beggar by Athena. and finds his palace overrun by 108 suitors. These young noblemen have been courting his wife Penelope for years, believing Odysseus is dead. They want to marry her and claim his throne. While they wait for her decision, they live in his home, feasting on his wealth, slaughtering his livestock, and sleeping with his servant girls. They are arrogant, wasteful, and disrespectful, but technically they are not breaking the law. In Greek culture, courting a widow is acceptable. From their perspective, they are competing for Penelope's hand in a socially normal way. From Odysseus's perspective, they have dishonored his family and tried to steal his kingdom, and he wants revenge. Odysseus reveals himself only to his son Telemachus and 2 loyal servants. Together, they devise a plan. Penelope announces a contest. She will marry whichever suitor can string Odysseus's massive war bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads. It is impossible. The bow is so heavy that none of the suitors can even string it. They try one by one, fail, and mock each other. Then the beggar, Odysseus in disguise, asks to try. The suitors laugh and insult him, but Penelope allows it. Odysseus strings the bow effortlessly. He fires an arrow through all 12 axes. The room goes silent. Then he reaches for another arrow and aims at the suitors. The first shot strikes Antinous, the leader of the suitors, through the throat. He collapses, choking on his own blood. The suitors panic, scrambling for weapons, but there are none. Earlier that day, Odysseus and Telemachus had quietly removed every sword and spear from the hall. The suitors are unarmed, trapped, defenseless. Odysseus tells them who he is. He tells them they have dishonored his home. He tells them they are going to die. They beg. They offer gold, repayment, anything. Some drop to their knees, weeping. A few were never cruel to Telemachus. A few tried to restrain the worst behavior. They argue they do not deserve death. Odysseus does not care. He fires. Imagine the scene. 108 men trapped in a hall, scrambling over each other, trying to hide behind overturned tables. Odysseus shoots them one by one. When he runs out of arrows, he switches to a spear. Telemachus and the 2 servants join the slaughter. The suitors try to fight with broken furniture, with anything they can grab, but they are panicked and unarmed. It takes hours. By the time it ends, all 108 are dead. The floor is slick with blood. Bodies are piled against the walls. But Odysseus is not finished. He orders the 12 servant girls who slept with the suitors to be brought before him. These are enslaved women, some teenagers who had no power to refuse. Some may have been coerced or raped. It does not matter to Odysseus. In his eyes, they betrayed him. He forces them to drag the corpses outside and scrub the blood from the floors. They work for hours, sobbing, knowing what is coming. When the hall is clean, Odysseus orders them hanged. All 12 at once, nooses tied around their necks, feet kicking in the air. Homer describes it simply. Their feet twitched for a little, but not for very long. Then he finds Melanthius, a goatherd who mocked him. Odysseus has him mutilated, nose, ears, hands, feet, and genitals cut off, while still alive, left to bleed out in the courtyard. By sunrise, it is over. 108 suitors dead, 12 servant girls dead, Melanthius dead. The palace is silent, soaked in blood. Odysseus has reclaimed his throne. So, was this justice or massacre? The case for justice. The suitors dishonored his home, wasted his wealth, and some plotted to kill Telemachus. In Greek terms, they deserved punishment. Odysseus gave them a fair contest. They failed. The servant girls and Melanthius were traitors. This was a king reasserting order. The case for massacre. The suitors were unarmed and begging for mercy. Some were young and foolish, guilty only of arrogance. Could Odysseus not have exiled them, held a trial? And the servant girls, they were enslaved, powerless. Some were raped. He hanged them all without distinguishing innocence from guilt. This was not battle. It was slaughter. Odysseus killed methodically, efficiently, without hesitation or remorse. He did not restore order. He imposed terror. Homer frames this as triumph. The gods approve. Athena helps him. Order is restored. But if you look at the body count, 108 men, 12 girls, 1 mutilated servant, it is hard to call this heroic. It is vengeance, brutal, total, unforgiving. The question is, does being wronged give you the right to become a monster? Let's talk about the people who do not get a happy ending. The men who followed Odysseus to war and never came home. Odysseus sailed from Ithaca with 12 ships, roughly 600 men. Farmers, fishermen, fathers, sons. They fought at Troy for 10 years. They survived plague, battles, sieges. When Troy fell, they loaded their ships with plunder and prepared to go home. How many made it back? 1. Odysseus. Every single one of his men died. Let that sink in. Imagine being the wife of one of those men. Your husband left 20 years ago. You raised your children alone. You waited. And then Odysseus returns, alone. You ask where your husband is, and he tells you he is dead. No grave, no body, just absence. Now imagine being one of those men, dying far from home because your king made a mistake. Let's count the cost. The Sirens. After leaving Troy, Odysseus raids a city for loot. His men celebrate instead of leaving. The enemy counterattacks. 72 men die, not from monsters, but from greed. The Cyclops. Odysseus insists on entering Polyphemus's cave for guest gifts. 6 men are eaten alive. Then he shouts his name, angering Poseidon, which triggers every disaster that follows. The Laestrygonians. Giant cannibals smash 11 of his 12 ships with boulders. Over 500 men die in one afternoon. Scylla. Odysseus sails close to a 6-headed monster, sacrificing 6 men, 1 for each head without telling them. It is a calculated choice. Cold. Brutal. The cattle of Helios, the crew, starving, eat sacred cattle. Zeus destroys the ship. Everyone drowns except Odysseus. Of 600 men, 0 make it home. Odysseus returns to Ithaca, reclaims his throne, reunites with his wife. He is celebrated as a hero, but he is also the only survivor. He has to face the families of 600 dead men. He has to look widows and orphans in the eye and explain that he survived, but they did not. Homer does not dwell on this. The Odyssey ends with triumph, but the silence of those 600 families hangs over the story like a ghost. Is a leader responsible for the deaths of his followers? Odysseus would argue he did everything he could. He faced impossible challenges, was cursed by gods, made hard choices in brutal situations. He survived because he was clever and favored by Athena. But how many deaths traced directly to his decisions? The Sirens. He let his men linger. The Cyclops. He entered the cave and shouted his name. Scylla. He sacrificed 6 men without warning. The cattle. He failed to keep starving men from breaking. Odysseus survived because he was willing to sacrifice others. He made cold decisions that kept him alive at the cost of his crew. When faced with a choice between his life and theirs, he chose himself. That does not make him a coward, but it makes him complicit. The 600 men who followed him deserved better. They deserved to come home. They did not. Odysseus did. That is the cost. So, after everything we have examined, the Trojan horse, the Cyclops, the years with Circe and Calypso, the massacre of the suitors, and the deaths of 600 men, we return to the question, is Odysseus a hero, or is he a monster? The answer is uncomfortable because it is both and neither. Odysseus is not a fairy tale character. He is a deeply flawed, deeply human figure who exists in the moral gray zone between brilliance and cruelty, between survival and selfishness. Let's lay out both sides. The case for hero. Odysseus survived 20 years of hell. He fought in a brutal war, was cursed by a god, and faced monsters that would have broken most men. He survived not through strength, but through intelligence. He outsmarts the Cyclops, he resists the Sirens, he builds the Trojan horse. In a world of warriors who solve problems with swords, Odysseus uses his mind. That is heroic. He remained loyal to his goal. Despite years with Circe and Calypso, despite being offered immortality, he never stopped trying to get home. He turned down godhood to return to his mortal wife. That perseverance is the heart of the hero's journey. He reclaimed his kingdom and restored order. The suitors dishonored his household. In ancient Greek culture, this was not murder, it was justice. Kings punished those who threatened their family and throne, and Odysseus was loved. His men followed him for 20 years. His wife waited. His son idolized him. The gods favored him. Athena herself was his protector. If he were truly a monster, would so many have been loyal? The Greeks saw him as the embodiment of metis, cunning intelligence, proof that you do not need to be the strongest to win, just the smartest. The case for monster. But strip away the poetry and look at what Odysseus actually did. He orchestrated the destruction of an entire city. Troy was sacked, its people slaughtered or enslaved. Babies were thrown from walls, temples burned, an entire civilization erased. Odysseus was the architect. He killed his own men through pride and recklessness. 6 died in the Cyclops cave because he wanted guest gifts. Hundreds more died because he shouted his name and angered Poseidon. He sacrificed 6 men to Scylla without warning. Of 600 men who followed him from Troy, 0 made it home. And Odysseus survived. He spent 8 years with goddesses while his wife remained faithful. Yes, he cried, but he also shared their beds. He enjoyed their gifts. Then he returned, expecting Penelope to welcome him without question. He committed mass murder in his own home. 108 unarmed men, many begging for mercy. 12 enslaved girls with no power to refuse the suitors. A servant mutilated and left to bleed out. The hall ran with blood. This was not justice. This was massacre. If Odysseus lived today, he would not be celebrated. He would be prosecuted. The Trojan horse, a war crime. Killing Astyanax, infanticide. The servant girls, murder. His crew's deaths, criminal negligence. The uncomfortable truth. Odysseus is a product of his time. The world he lived in was brutal and unforgiving. Morality was about survival, honor, and victory. In that context, his actions make sense. He did what he had to do to win. The Greeks admired him not because he was morally perfect, but because he was effective. He survived when others did not. He won when victory seemed impossible. In a world where the strong devoured the weak, intelligence proved stronger than muscle. But we do not live in that world anymore. We have concepts like human rights, proportional justice, and accountability. We believe the ends do not always justify the means. We believe killing unarmed people is wrong, even if they wronged you. We believe leaders are responsible for those who follow them. By modern standards, Odysseus is a monster. By ancient Greek standards, he is a hero. So which is true? Both. And that is what makes Odysseus one of the most fascinating characters in mythology. He is brilliant and cruel, loyal and selfish, a survivor and a killer. Homer does not judge him. He simply shows us what happened and lets us decide. That is the genius of the Odyssey. It does not give easy answers. It asks questions and forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about heroism, morality, and survival. The final question. If Odysseus stood trial today and you were on the jury, what would your verdict be? Would you acquit him because he was a product of his time, because he survived impossible odds, because he was loyal to his goal? Or would you convict him because he orchestrated genocide, because his pride killed hundreds, because he murdered the defenseless without mercy? There is no right answer. But your answer reveals what you believe heroism really means. Odysseus is a mirror. When you look at him, you see what you value. If you value intelligence, resilience, and survival at all costs, you see a hero. If you value compassion, accountability, and human life, you see a monster. And maybe the truth is that he is both. Because Odysseus is not a god. He is a man. And men are capable of both greatness and horror. The question is, which side do we choose to remember? The story of Odysseus has survived for nearly 3,000 years. Homer's Odyssey is one of the oldest and most influential works of literature in human history. It has been translated into every major language. It has inspired countless adaptations, plays, novels, films, operas. Odysseus himself has become an archetype, a symbol of the clever survivor, the man who refuses to give up no matter how impossible the odds. But the reason the story endures is not because Odysseus is perfect. It is because he is flawed. He is complicated. He is human. Homer did not give us a simple hero. He gave us a man who makes terrible choices and brilliant decisions, sometimes in the same breath. A man who loves his family but sacrifices others to get back to them. A man who is capable of extraordinary courage and extraordinary cruelty. A man who survives, but at a cost that we are still debating thousands of years later. That is what makes the Odyssey timeless. It does not tell us what to think. It shows us what happened and asks us to wrestle with it. It asks us to think about what heroism really means. It asks us to consider whether survival justifies any action. It asks us whether loyalty to one goal, getting home, excuses every betrayal along the way. And it leaves the answer up to us. So, I want to hear from you. Do you think Odysseus is a hero or a monster? Do you think his intelligence and perseverance outweigh the blood on his hands? Or do you think his actions at Troy with the Cyclops in his own hall make him a war criminal who happened to win? Leave your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think, and if you disagree with someone else's opinion, engage with them, debate, discuss. That is what the story is for. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of mythology's most complex characters, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We will be doing more deep dives into mythological and historical figures, pulling back the curtain on the stories we are told and asking whether the heroes of legend deserve that title. Next time, we might look at Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Trojan War, and ask whether his rage was justified or just selfish pride. Or maybe we will examine Medea, the sorceress who killed her own children, and ask whether she was a villain or a victim of betrayal. Let me know in the comments who you want to see analyzed next. Thank you for watching. Thank you for thinking, and remember, history and mythology are not about finding easy answers. They are about asking hard questions. Until next time.